Hello my friends, I'm Rick and this is your seat at the table, and we are now looking at Mechwarrior Companion, and this was a FASA product, and this one that came out in that very last year, and I don't remember buying it. To be honest with you, I don't think I was buying. I knew there was issues going on at FASA at the time, but as role-playing games go, I was just starting to get into it, and so I had bought the core book. And I was looking at other books, but it's just not something that came across the table at the time. It's that, or it's a product that never showed up at my local bookstore, because that happens more than you'd think, especially back in the day. There were a lot of places that would get product from a company making game material, but it wasn't always consistent. Might be availability. The company might have only issued 5,000 copy print or something like that, and the bookstore just didn't get there quick enough, or they didn't get it in their catalog. A lot of things were done by hand and by paper back then. I'm just saying. So I always like these kind of books because it gives us a wider range of how we can immerse ourselves into a gaming environment. And for a lot of players who, the big stompy robots, the tabletop war game aspect is the main purpose of the game system. They're not drawn to these, but the fact that the gaming industry is quite broad, and the fans of games are pretty broad too, and it was just inevitable. People were going, there was enough role-playing game elements in the original Battletech, especially with the stories and the novels, that it just kind of drew itself in. People wanted to play in the universe, and they wanted to do it on a more personal level, which is how we get to that sort of thing. So this obviously is a PDF. It's provided by one of y'all, and I'm quite grateful for it. And it took me probably better part of 2 weeks to read through it. I went through it kind of in surges, and that's kind of the deal. I mean, these are not novels, they're not stories, so there's a lot of dry crunch no matter how you spin it, and then there's a lot of repetitive stuff too. So we get into the traditional explanation of the introduction, the clans, the inner sphere, blah blah blah. Then we get the inner sphere map of 3058. And that's a really crappy copy. This is what it is. Character design chapter. So skill packages, things like skills, reputation, well connected, contact, using contacts, dropship types, etc., etc. So we're going on still onto the skill section, and you'll find in most role-playing games that most games that are similar genres, so a science fantasy or science fiction game is likely to have a lot of similarities to just about every other version out there. So you can have 5 different companies making 5 different types of Dungeons and Dragons like games, and have them be sufficiently enough, separate enough, or diverse enough to avoid the never-ending legal wrangling that might occur otherwise. Or the truth is, so much stuff is ubiquitous that no one company can lay claims to it. Although there have been some in the past that have tried, and with mixed results. Usually they fail. A lot of litigation at the end of the day, and a lot of money coming out of people's pockets. So we got a master skill list. So inner sphere archetypes. We are looking at armored infantry trooper, guerrilla fighter, dropship captain, marine, Crusader Elemental, Tanker, Crusader Mech Warrior, Dropship Jump Ship Pilot, Scientist, Merchant, Technician. Then we get into Mechwarrior Companion Combat, Personal Combat, Armor Defeating Hits, Additional Attacks, Lucky Shots, Vulnerable Spots, Critical Hits, Burst Fire Options, Crushing Fire, Standard burst, targeting. It's interesting because I have another reason for enjoying reading things like this, in part because, as you well know, if you follow my channel, you will be bombarded by my own lackadaisical love of the game I created myself. This one here. And in part because, like I said, there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of things you try to cover. And if you play enough combat simulated game systems, you kind of get a feel for what ought to be there. So I find it interesting when I look at somebody else's version of, you know, how your characters are going to comport themselves or rules they need to handle in a melee combat scenario for a role-playing game, and I see what they have, and then I compare it to what I have, and I think, you know, isn't it clever that I was smart enough to know that I would need just about everything that these people thought of. It's in here too. Imagine that. But I guess that also comes with, I don't know, gobs of experience playing this stuff, you know, and a lifetime obsession with it in some ways. It is what it is, right? So combat, and I don't care what game system you utilize. I know that in early Mechwarrior ground combat, there were some ooky rules, right? They didn't quite work well, and sometimes you had to realize the first key of realizing the rules weren't working well is realizing the rule wasn't working well, which is why we were having some kind of issue or problem. And the other was to understand that, like I said, one of the downsides to role-playing game creation is the challenge to avoid plagiarism. Litigation doesn't happen that often, but it does happen. So you have to, there's a famous argument there between the Tolkien estate and the early TSR when they went after Gygax for Gygax's choice to use halfling as his moniker for a hobbit instead of halfling, and Tolkien's people at the time weren't going to have it because that was there was a violation of and I think the Iron Crown had rights to Tolkien's role-playing game version of stuff anyway. So anyway, that's an example of what I'm talking about there. And that's the infantry and battle armor, battle mech and vehicle fire against characters. Yeah, that's devastating. That was another thing. One of the challenges to create a multi-tier game system where you're dealing with multiple scale combat is having at least, even if it never makes it to the rulebook itself, the creators need to have a basic idea of the curve, if you will, or the defense. So a naval autocannon is a weapon that's shooting crap that literally the size of Kaibos at people. You're shooting outhouses at people and bigger. And so that's a big, huge thing, as opposed to compared to, say, an autocannon that we mount on a mech or a tank. An AC-10 is still a big, bulky weapon. It weighs what, 6, 7 tons, 8, somewhere in that range, and so it's a heavy grade weapon, and the munitions it's shooting are as big as our fists or grapefruit size or bigger. And so by definition, if a single person holding a shotgun or a rifle, which would be if you really make the argument, the rifle is the personal scale version of an autocannon. It's just kind of, so in scale, you're going to have a personal scale, you're going to have a vehicle scale, and then you're going to have a capital ship scale or a naval grade scale. And so you have these crossovers that at no point should naval grade weapons ever come into the equation against a role-playing game scenario on the planet. So, I mean, what I'm saying is you don't have a warship in orbit targeting a naval laser battery at a small group of people on the planet. I mean, the accuracy factors, all the other stuff, the mechanics just basically don't allow for it, and it's for damn good reason. It really F's up the flow of the game if you can just squash a group of players with like a bug. And so we don't want that. No, what we get are a whole slew of charts that things like you can target the area and hope that you hit the target, the player characters. You can target the building that they're in, but you have to take that into account. It's just, so in the same grade. So when vehicle grade, mech grade weaponry engages capital ships, it's on a much significant scale, but it's still possible. So the amount of damage that they can do collectively versus the amount of damage that a capital grade warship, for example, can sustain would be negligible. So at the end of the day, it's quite possible that a heavy assault mech could sit there and cycle through its weapons nonstop and not even scratch the naval grade shielding in or armor that's on that warship. That's not to say that they couldn't find some critical odd MacGuffin spot, but generally speaking, it's just you would need an entire company or more massed firepower to even worry a serious warship. Now, this is why you don't see a single mech taking out a dropship. That dropship has to be in extremely bad shape in order for that to happen. It's not impossible, unless some unforeseen or comical and or dramatic intentional scene takes place, i.e., somehow you manage to run your Marauder up into the landing bay of said dropship and then open fire from the inside. Well, that's a different set of parameters altogether now, isn't it? So it's the same scale. So on a personal scale, people with rifles have no business even shooting at a warship. And so in my own game system, we take into modifications in to that effect. So when I talk about body points, the average human being, unmodified in Interstellar Frontiers, has 30 body points, 30 hit points at the personal scale. Now, from personal scale to vehicle scale, it's reduced by a factor of 10. So if you have 30 body points, you actually only have 3 body points when it comes to facing a cannon that's mounted on a tank. It's just, a heavy machine gun is going to murder you, and that's the whole point. Right? That's kind of the whole point. Meanwhile, a naval grade weapon is going to not going to hit you at all, but it might vaporize the entire block you're sitting on and take you out as collateral damage. But that's kind of that scenario setup. So it's just like a single person, no matter what kind of man-portable weapon system they may be able to carry, are not going to be a threat to a warship. They're not going to be a threat to a dropship. It's just not going to happen. Unless they do it through unconventional means, i.e. they infiltrate the ship, they take over by force, or they sabotage it in some way so it blows up. Then sure, at that point you might have some issue, but it is what it is. So we look at how to run the game, suggestions on the universe, setting the stage, world's roar, backgrounds and settings, creating campaigns. So here we got some examples: small mercenary units, large units, small house units, large house units, merchants, pirates, treasure hunters. Mission-based options. See, that was also the thing. Once we started diversifying, once we started to get away from just tabletop wargaming, the wider range of game play options explodes. So you have huge amounts of things you would never have considered before at a tabletop wargame, because the tabletop generally is considered, uniform units, military versus military, and there's no lot of in between. You start throwing a role-playing game into the mix. Now we have game options where your group could be literally happen to use their mech to extradite themselves from a problem, or perhaps for cover and backup for the rest of the group and trying to infiltrate somebody's office, or potentially, the combat here is going to revolve around non-military forces. Perhaps this is security versus a terrorist group, or private guards versus some sort of I'm getting out. I'm starting to struggle trying to come up with that right. Okay. Fleshing out the campaign, things like adversaries, subplots, all those things that I advocate over and over again when it comes to creating campaigns is the reuse of NPCs and baddies. Whenever possible, things shouldn't die. They should want to at some point, self-preservation should kick in, and in certain classes and certain types of personalities, that preservation kicks in a lot sooner than later. They're not going to, most intelligent beings. They're not going to sit there until you literally beat them with an inch of their life before they decide maybe it's better if I leave. No, they're going to really assess the situation, and if they find that they're losing right away, they're likely to extradite themselves and come back at you in another manner, because that's how they should work. So having reoccurring characters in a campaign is great when you have both supporting characters and bad guys. Now, supporting, and both these can play out real well, because you can have bad guys that are part of your own side. You can have a higher, you can have a logistics officer who has a bug up their butt for somebody that's in your group and is doing their level best to make sure your group is always at the last of the queue line for anything, and go on from there, right? So running a game, variety, keeping it on course, building a unit, general environment, coping with change. And we got terrain conditions tables, the clans. The clans are always a unique challenge in and of themselves, and I've known players that absolutely will not bring the clans to their table. They decided the clans are non-starters, and anything that remotely relates to clans went south. And the irony isn't lost on me that later that a lot of these same people embrace the jihad era, sans the clans, because now we got, Word of Blake versus everybody. So anyway, so we got a chapter on creatures abilities, creatures in combat. You look at these pages and you take it for granted when you're a player or a GM that this is how something works, this is how their system is established. So this is just what we accept as how creatures and beasts work in this particular game system. You really don't understand or appreciate the sheer amount of headaches and BS that went to create this crap. I'm telling you, I know from personal experience, these can be extremely challenging things, and especially in science fiction, the harder, the vaster your sandbox. And we're talking thousands of light years and thousands of solar systems and hundreds of habitable worlds, and so on and so on. The sheer variety of alien plant and animal life is impossible to catalog. I mean, so we kind of do a tuck and a nudge, a bit of an elbow. We do an eye roll and a nod when we buy into a lot of writers and creators of science fiction environments. So what I mean by that is, obviously, if we look at Battletech is human-centric. There's no aliens, and we don't want aliens, because there's plenty of games with aliens. We don't need them. And we're dealing with humanity in all of its glory and all of its insanity and all of its creative destructiveness, all packaged up into the same crap that basically you could see here today on Earth. It just keeps right on rolling along with just different versions of it. And so having some uniformity to that makes it much easier for the game creators, because they don't have to worry about a lot of other shit. So early on, when we're talking about tabletop war games, well, our battle mechs never ever encountered. You don't do battle mechs versus dinosaur engagements. I mean, you might do one of those as a larf, as some fun, but you know what? Them dinosaurs ain't really got a chance. Them dinosaurs ain't got a whole lot of options against things that can stand far away from them and just shell and bomb them until they're incinerated. You no matter how exotic and how up armored you make them. I'm not saying that they can't, because we know in game, in canon, there are a couple boogies out there that can and will destroy a mech, and for one reason or another. And I think at least one reference in canon of a plant of basically a cow-like animal that's so massive that they use Wrangler mechs, basically industrial mechs, to handle and control these things. Because to do so without one of these armored machines is just I imagine just getting trampled to death, because these things are they're bigger than elephants. If I haven't seen the actual entry for them, but I know, and I'm struggling to remember exactly what novel I got that out of, but I know damn well it's in the canon. If y'all know, hey, put it down, right? Let us know. So we got some new beasts, some new critters. A typical, you will see some items here that potentially can threaten a mech, and there's a reason for that, because mechs are the big stompy things in the game. So you want to have a Megasaur that can give a thing a challenge. But you know what? Let's not have planets full of I don't know, Godzilla, because if humanity came to a planet and had a bunch of mega titans running around on the surface, we wouldn't bother with the planet. You know, if they were lucky, we might not nuke them from orbit. But when you're dealing with megafauna, especially 1970s circa Japanese megafauna, nuking them is probably not a good idea. I'm just saying. So we don't need that sort of crap in the game. It makes for a very brief, kind of comical or terror moment. But aside from that, no. The real threat for that kind of fauna is if you're out in the field and your mech gets broke down, for example, or your unit is forced to go in on infiltrate someplace on foot. Now you got to get out there and you're on one-on-one with a raptor that's as big as you are and is 20 times as hungry. Now you got a game. Anyway, so we got our equipment section. I always love the equipment sections because I'm always looking for new things that pop up and crap out. I like how they went to a little bit more effort to explain the prosthetics and the cybernetics that go into Battletech. It's one of those things that we kind of do once again, a wink and a nod, but it gets a lot of promise in the novels. You see quite a few references, especially in the clans. It is quite common to lose an entire limb or many limbs and have them replaced. You can either have them literally regrown, so you have a replacement of your original, and everything below that. So I mean, the fact that they're all there is great. And once again, this is one of those elements that when I was creating my own game and I had players going, well, how do I do this? What if my agent does this? And I said, oh crap, we got to have that. So it became, I don't know, I think I spent better part of a year just working on that chapter of dealing with cybernetics and bioorganics and things like that, because in my game that plays a significant role down the road. It's just a matter of how you progress your colony and how you play the game. Because if you choose to play the game as a pseudo role-playing game, then all this stuff's on the table and you want access to every bit of it. Both as a player and both as a player and the game master, in my opinion. So it's really great to see these, and I look forward to going back and rereading them a couple times, because there's always nuances, and a lot of it's just basic stuff. That's the modifications, the modifiers, the pros and cons, the negatives and positives that they affect in a given situation or moment in a game might be negligible, but then it might be everything. That half a point, that 1 point difference because you have to be carrying a med pack might be the difference between your character surviving and not surviving, or somebody, you're achieving a mission goal or whatever. So, I mean, you don't take that stuff into account until you want it, as opposed to the other people who are fully aware of how valuable it is, and they want to carry it 10, they want to carry 10 times, they want to carry 10 versions of it and 10 other things, and then you have to start enforcing things like encumbrance, which is one of them ho-hum, boring, resource management elements to a lot of games that a lot of people don't like, or they tend to ignore. One of the most commonly ignored set of rules in most role-playing games is encumbrance followed by movement, specifically land movement, long-range travel kind of stuff. We just kind of wink and nudge and poof, don't care. Alright, so battle armor capabilities, battle armor in combat, life support, outfitting battle armoring unit. Alright, then we get some standards battle armor. I think most of these are pretty generic that are found in other books. Miscellaneous equipment, note meters, jump packs, espionage, surveillance gear. That was an element of Battletech that I truly, really love, and I do that in a lot of games. I don't care what the games in general are. I've always had a fascination for the espionage and spying sort of thing. The really in-depth personal scale, in my mind, how that evolves. And it's excellent for if you've only got one player, it's just you and a buddy and you and your spouse, and you really want to get an intense one-on-one game system going, or game encounter or campaign going. There's the route to go, because you have, you get the James Bonds of the world who have a quite elaborate support teams behind them, but are individuals enough to not need them in a pinch. And the fact that they have them just makes them that much more awesome and that much more of a heavy impact. But more important, because they stand alone. The individual character, James Bond himself, is the sole character of that story. Everything else is either supporting actors or bad guys. So you can really get in deep, and you can go into some pretty deep levels if you got a good, if your player and your GM are connected on let's not be superficial, because I've played more superficial games than I want to count. And that's usually a game when nobody's invested. It's just here to pass some time. Okay, yeah, it's fun, it's all right, but we could have done this, or I could have done that, or I could have been watching TV, kind of thing. Anyway, various portable sensors and demolition of gear, anti-personnel mines, personal weapons. We got sniper systems, holdout laser pistols. We get some. Now we're getting into unit support weapons, medium recoilless rifles, gas cannons, stuff that can actually, be a threat to a mech. Yeah, anyway, so heavier equipment, blah blah blah. Yeah, we always like this stuff because I'm always encouraged to look at these when I see new generation books come out, because it's interesting to see what kind of personal tweaks it's been going on, especially if you look at the mechanic level, what's going on below the surface. And that's what I get when I tell people, well, there's not really nothing going on there. Really? So if we look at, I don't know, the electronic compass. It's got tech level 3, costs $30, availability A, which means pretty much anywhere you can get it. The modern electronic compass is a pocket-sized device that indicates magnetic poles. All right, so it sounds simple, but you know how many possible MacGuffin or little chicken eggs you can use with these sort of items? Not to mention the fact that these can be modified. So you can have a modified version of this if there's a reason or desire to do that. But it might also increase the reliability factor of a situation. So if my character is in a place where I don't know, his mech takes a hit to its computers and it can't navigate anymore, blah blah blah. So I mean, it's just is what it is. We got tables, personal gear, all that. So we got all the stats and stuff for all these things. We got some nice little bits of artwork. I didn't print them in color though. I mean, like I said, I'm lucky I have access to a Xerox machine that can do these in the first place, and I'm not trying to totally abuse that privilege, and so I would not print very much stuff in color other than covers, maybe the rare map or something that really leaps out that I ought to. But there's some, like I said, you can see the evolution. All right, so this is 1995's artwork. And it's come quite a ways from the 1980s artwork from just 10 years earlier. And it's showing, this would be second, third generation artists that are working in, the genre with lots of previous stuff. And some of this is clearly just mimicking older original shit, which is great. I mean, it's fine. I like it because the more there is, the more a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there's a lot of legitimacy to that. I mean, it just is, right? So, it's all good. Anyway, that is Mechwarrior Companion from the FASA Corporation, circa 1995-ish. And if you can get your hands on it and you're into the role-playing side of this game, this is a great book. If you're using the newest version of this stuff, then you probably don't need it. But once again, like I said, there's a lot of possibility that the older material will have stuff in them that gets left out in newer versions, or gets replaced by something else in newer versions. So the fact that you have options, it's just like rules. There are rules that will people won't like them, or they won't be misunderstood, or they won't be as well received, or they're just kind of whimsical or whatever, and then they're only in one entry, and then the next entry of a similar rule set comes out and that's missing. And if you're not looking for it, you don't pay attention to it, it's not a big deal. But the fact that these things offer a lot of windows of possibility are always an excellent thing. And then there's the lore factor, the knowledge factor of actually having material that comes from the earlier ages of the game system. We are over 40 years. Battletech has been going for over 40 years, and it's just, you could pick up any one of the game books from the mid 80s and sit down and be playing in 15 minutes. And you can take most of the new game system box sets and stuff today, 15-20 minutes, you're at the table playing. And if you've never played a game in your life, I mean, it's that simple, it's that easy, you can get it. This is a great thing to have. Anyway, I'm Rick, you're not. Till next time.